After I ruminated a little bit on that, I conveyed my respect to her. Did you figure all that out on your own? I mean, that could be the topic for a comprehensive psychological study. Sometimes experience conveys more than any book, she responded wisely. There it is, another one, I remarked as both of us started to laugh. Do you also know that much about more tangible matters? You mean like knowledge instead of wisdom knowledge? Maybe. One further passion is meteorology, and therefore I've invested many hours accumulating knowledge. Alright, then how can you explain clouds? I became curious. Clouds. When the sun radiates onto Earth, the air warms up, and since the density of warmer air is lower than colder air, it rises up. So the fundamental principles are called thermal or convection in a more general sense. And as a consequence, we see the condensation process, which is nothing different than the transition between the gas and the liquid phase. When the air rises up, water droplets and ice crystals emerge. The secondary happens especially when it reaches colder layers of the atmosphere. And those are called clouds and are visible due to the me scattering. Out of an impulse, I replied, Chloe, is it alright when I see you as my personal dictionary? She chuckled a bit and said, I love to speak about that stuff anyway, so I don't see any problems with that. A wide smile emerged in both our faces as a result. Whereas specifically in my case, it could have been also due to the pure fascination she triggered inside me. My next question was about the term me or me scattering. It remembered me of the old game console of Nintendo called Nintendo Wii, and the characters you could create were called me's. But at the same time, I was highly aware that those subjects had nothing in common, obviously. But right when I spoke out the first word, I was interrupted by the door cracking and then opening. Normally, I was glad when I was visited, but this time, not now. However, the fact that it was my parents visiting me diminished my grudge a little bit. I still had my message from last night present in my mind, and I hoped that they fulfilled my request. But when I asked them right away when they entered, I would alert Chloe. And then it wouldn't be a surprise anymore. So while we conducted the conversation in a group of 4, my parents and I played out a tactical masterpiece. And every once in a while, they gave me indirect answers to my not yet asked question. Whenever they formulated a statement, they used emphasis to transfer hints. For example, I have thought about it, but I can't remember. Maybe I'm able to recall later. Obviously, it made only sense together with the context. But to understand the intended meaning, I had to neglect that. And so it became kind of a secret language. I figured out tip by tip that my parents only waited for the appropriate opportunity. But since Chloe was very attentive, they had to use Plan B, which followed the motto, when you don't have an opportunity, create one. And I was the observer of a scene straight from Hollywood. Dad stood up and walked slowly towards the coat stand, where his jacket was placed. He seemed to be looking for something in one of his pockets. A couple of seconds later, he gave my mom a smile, as if he wanted to say that he had what he was looking for. I, not really impressed, or rather, still unaware of his true intention, turned towards mother again, as I wanted to fuel the conversation. But right before I could, I noticed a loud rattling sound, which emitted from Dad's car keys that have fallen onto the ground. The conversation was terminated instantly, as every one of us, remaining on our seats or beds, investigated the cause. My dad brought up this ironic explanation when he said how clumsy he was today. It seemed kind of odd, but exactly when I felt something pushing against my leg, I knew what kind of game they were playing. It was a demonstration of perfect teamwork, as I concluded when I investigated the slight touch on my leg. It was the red case that kept the very thing inside I asked for, and when I saw it, I almost bursted out into laughter, but could keep myself in chains. knowing that otherwise my parents' effort would have been in vain. Instead, I only smiled at them from ear to ear and waited until they left to show myself grateful in the exact manner they communicated with me before. When my father picked up his keys again, he saw his mission accomplished and intended further to leave. Since my mother had done her deed as well, she agreed and followed him, while wishing Chloe and me a pleasant evening. Before they opened the door, I shouted, "Thank you for this key moment," to which they only responded by blinking. Chloe must have assumed it to be an insider, because she showed no interest at all. But however, I was just glad that I had something to fill this evening with, and maybe, who knows, also the following ones. Anyways, before I made first approaches towards my desire for this evening, we kept on talking for a bit, about my parents, about the subjects we spoke with them about, and so on. Afterwards, she only remarked that my mom and dad were great together, on which I could only agree. To be honest, I saw many parallels between on one side my parents and on the other Chloe and me. Even though we were still far away from intimate conversations, I feel like we were on the best way to change that. And one stepstone I imagine to be an approach from my side. Although I never had direct experiences with that topic, I had a lot of time to observe other people going that way. And while observing, I saw what works and what does not. For instance, the point I see of relevance for my situation now were my approach. After all, a relationship consists of two people, so both of them, both of us, had to invest something. And since she already did a lot referring to that, it were now my turn. So the next thing I had to do to proceed were applying my plan. I mean, I had so much prep work to do. So had my parents. But it's not about them. This is solely about Chloe and me, and what would be a better location for a date than a hospital? I mean, it's not like we could just go outside and go for a walk. Theoretically we could, if we announced to the doctors. But on the other side, that were only a mainstream date, which wouldn't have many incentives compared to a couple of matches you know. So having concluded that, I have now the confirmation of what's best to do. But sadly, that changes nothing. My approach is still on the to-do list. I felt as if I were meant to make a proposal. But the truth was that I only wanted to ask her if she wanted to play Uno with me. So here we go. Breathing in and breathing out, decreasing tension as I constructed my question mentally, and increasing tension right when I wanted to formulate it. Chloe, there is something I would like to ask you. Then bring it on. There's nothing interrupting us right now, except for the nurses. But even if, I have employed a bodyguard, who is standing right outside and letting no one in. You have what? I understand, gosh. I replied a bit perplexed. So Aaron, what's on your mind? She smiled at me in expectation. Wait, what was my sentence? I wanted to know if you like to play Uno with me. After I said that, I felt goosebumps all over my body, which intensified right when I registered her answer. I'd love to do that, but I guess we need cards first. I don't think they have a local game store inside the hospital. Contrary to the situation before, where I was unable to speak due to nervousness, it was now the ecstatic state I found myself in that made me a little bit insecure in speech. We don't need cards. We already have some. She looked at me in astonishment as I reached for the red case inside my drawer. Does that mean you had them all along since you arrived here? No. The package was delivered only a few hours ago. You surely can remember those people from before, right? I like to call them Mom and Dad. While she was nodding in amazement, I continued. Try to recall that situation when my dad threw his keys onto the ground. Or rather, when they accidentally fell to the ground. Exactly then, the package was delivered. I smiled proudly, as she only looked at me and gazed with her eyes wide open. Remarkable. Truly remarkable. Didn't see that coming. Yeah, how could you? Some plans are impossible to anticipate. I mean, you proved me that seconds ago, so I guess you're right. She kept on speaking and came back to the main topic. So long story short, that means we could start playing now? I'd say yes, but where? Your place or mine? The last part of the sentence almost felt bad, because it was such a cheap pickup line that is oftentimes used to imply further intentions. But at least she understood me the way I wanted her to. Well, Aaron, then jump over. At first, I was kind of surprised due to the spontaneity she connected with that, but hesitated not much longer and lifted the blanket from my body and approached slowly. Carefully, I placed myself at the other end of her bed as I greeted her with a shy hello. She chuckled a bit when she replied, "You can come a little bit closer. I won't bite, I promise." Piece by piece, centimeter by centimeter, I got closer until our knees almost touched each other. While we were in a cross-legged position, against all odds, we just sat there and looked at each other. At the beginning, it was strange, but the longer we did it, the more mesmerizing it got. But before it got too weird, I chose to unpack the cards. Wait, where? She pointed at my bedside table, where they still were situated on. I only commented to myself that this was highly embarrassing, because according to me, it appeared to be intended. However, in a rash motion, I raised myself and picked up the cards. When I turned around, she already clapped on the place I should sit, and so I did. "You know the game, so you already know the rules?" I asked to initiate. "Basically, yes, but we should reach common understanding, since the game is played in many different ways and rules." "Alright, so I've always played it like that. We have 7 cards each, and our goal is to get rid of all of them. The card you throw away has to match with the card on the pile, which means 3 on 3, red on red, yellow on yellow, and so on. The only exception is the black cards. They can be used at any time, unless you have to draw cards. When you have to draw cards, you are suspended from the game for your next turn. The only question is, do we play with ricochet? You mean that I could counter your drawing card? Exactly. That could stack up to 20 cards potentially, when I gave you a +2 and you replied. It would stack until we have no plus cards anymore, and you can only counter with the equivalent. +2 with +2, and +4 with +4. I know this version, but I've always preferred the less brutal one, where the maximum of cards to draw doesn't exceed 4. Fair enough. That name, by the way, is quite funny, so I guess we will use the less brutal variant. And by the way, let's say you know when we have only 1 card left. If one forgets it, 2 cards will be added to our hand, okay? Only for transparency purposes. Both of us agreed on that, which meant let the games begin.